What up, y'all? Good morning. This is the MOBC, My Own Boxing Community, and I want to talk about the heavyweight division and the events that we had recently and the events that's taking place in the future and the rumors of what events will take place. Back in the days, there was a time when the heavyweight division was the king of the division, and it's always been that way. If you go back to the pound for pound talks, the heavyweight boxer world champion wasn't considered ever on the pound for pound list because they only fight in one division. And I remember Floyd Mayweather speaking the rhetoric that comes out of his mouth and how easy it is because he knows he can manipulate his his crazed fans. How he said Muhammad Ali could never be greater than him because he only fought in one weight class. And what he said didn't make any sense, and it goes back to the history of the pound for pound. The heavyweight division was the king of the division. A heavyweight division wasn't considered to be pound for pound, couldn't be considered pound for pound because the heavyweight division is the king of division, king of the division. They are the biggest boxers, they are the strongest boxers, they hit the hardest. Everything, one punch in the heavyweight division could change, and one punch could in any weight class could change the course of the fight. But what I'm saying is, in the heavyweight division, everyone is a puncher, right? This is the big king of the division. So, heavyweight boxer could not be considered in the pound for pound list. And in the past, we had so many great heavyweights, dating all the way back to the Jack Johnson era. The heavyweights back then were smaller than the heavyweights today. But it isn't always size, right? I mean, you had a big heavyweight like Primo Carnera, who was like the freak of nature, right? And he was considered this big, strong heavyweight that was going to take down all the heavyweights. And then he fights a smaller heavyweight, a small heavyweight. If he fought today, he would be considered a small heavyweight. Joe Lewis, and Joe Lewis knocks him out. So it wasn't always about just size. And that's what we hear today is heavyweights are big. Heavyweights are big. They're bigger than heavyweights from the past, right? And I don't even have to go far back as the Jack Johnson or Joe Lewis era. Those heavyweights, there were heavyweights back in the days before the 60s and 70s that were on the same size and weight as fighters of the 80s and the 90s. Joe Lewis could definitely compete as a heavyweight in the 60s, later 60s, excuse me, in the 70s, in the 80s. He could. We have fantasy matchup debates all the time about Joe Lewis fighting Joe Frazier, Joe Lewis fighting Evander Holyfield, because At the time, the heavyweights were still on the same weight class, right? Mike Tyson's best weight that I saw was between 205 pounds to 211 pounds, 210 pounds. Mike Tyson was way under. I mean, but when he started weighing like the 220, 220 something, he was still fast. But when you caught Mike Tyson around 205 pounds, 210 pounds, he was Manny Pacquiao at heavyweight. Muhammad Ali, 205, 211 pounds, 212 pounds. Lightning fast, speed, footwork. Faster on his feet than some lightweights. That's ridiculously fast. Right? And then not to mention the size of the heavyweights back in the days, the Jack Dempseys and Gene Tunney, right? These guys are small heavyweights. Rocky Marciano, right? Joe Louis, good 204 pounds, 205 pounds. Jersey Joe Walcott. I mean, you name it. These are smaller heavyweights. Ezra Charles moved up from light heavyweight. I mean, he was a heavyweight. He was a small heavyweight. But they weren't small back then for their era. And they were in shape and they fought for 15 rounds. I mean, you don't even have to go that far back. You could go, I mean, we had heavyweights like Cleveland Williams who woke up with muscles. Cleveland Williams woke up buff for no reason, in shape. I mean, we're talking about fighters back then who they didn't know what the effects of alcohol did to you and tobacco. Those things weren't studied yet. I mean, we had fighters, heavyweight fighters, full-time heavyweight fighters, drunk alcohol on occasion, some nightly, right? Some smoked cigarettes and had full-time jobs and still trained and still dedicated to the art of boxing and still was able to fight for 15 rounds. The heavyweight division back in the days was really, really competitive. And I'm talking about from the very beginning of boxing all the way up until the Lennox Lewis era, right? Because the opinion of many is that the Vladimir Klitschko era was pretty much the beginning and the end of the heavyweight division. And so he supposedly has a weak era. And Vladimir Klitschko is still one of the best heavyweights in the world to ever step in the ring. But the downside is that he supposedly fought in a weak division. So what do we have today? What's up, Iron Kong? Salute. Salute. Happy New Year. Salute. Salute, salute. They set up Big Baby. They ducking. Yeah, it's the heavyweight division. What do we have today? I look at these heavyweights and I see talent. There's talent in Anthony Joshua. There's talent. As much as I talk bad about Wilder, and more so that's just because Wilder has crazy fans, right? Every one of us who debated and went against Wilder fans and said bad things about Wilder, every single one of us, all still like the knockouts by Wilder, no matter what his opposition looked like. I'd be lying if I said I didn't like to watch Wilder fight. So there's talent there. There's talent in Anthony Joshua. There's talent in Andy Ruiz and how big he is, and it could still, for this era, right? There's talent in a lot of these heavyweights for this era, but are they better than the past heavyweights? How much of the 80s and 90s heavyweights would pass the VADA test today? I don't know, because uh, I know that there's a lot of talk about PEDs might have been used back then. I don't know. In my opinion, if someone was to, if I was to debate that, I would say today athletes use more PEDs than they did back then. In my opinion, I think a lot of the fighters were clean back then. I think see back then it was anabolic steroids, and you would see fighters. You would tell if a fighter was on steroids, and there's not one heavyweight in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s that even looks like they were on steroids. I mean, even Mike Weaver, he didn't even have gynoplastia. Um, they didn't have. Now there's PEDs like Big Baby Miller, who's taking PEDs have been advanced. There's PEDs that helps you with your agility. There's HGHG, hormone growth, hormone. There's testosterone. There's all these different things. So, in my opinion, I don't think that the heavyweights in the past was on steroids. Now, if we're talking about the '90s, that's something else. '90s is a different ball game. But if we're talking about the Larry Holmes era and the Muhammad Ali era, nah, I think those guys were clean. They was clean. They were clean. So we're talking about the heavyweights now. Are they better than the past heavyweights? Could they be better than the past heavyweights? I mean, the argument is, oh, well, Wilder or Anthony Joshua or even Andy Ruiz, he would be bigger than the past heavyweights. But I said this before and I said it again. A lot of these heavyweights wouldn't be the size they are back then. And they would have to fight 15 rounds. And there wasn't hormones in the food. And there wasn't creatine and all these different protein powders and nutritionists and people putting you on certain diets. There wasn't any of that. None of these heavyweights would be as big as they are. Just like none of these welterweights, just like none of these lightweights, just like none of these superweights. None of these guys would be big as they are today back then. Because everything was different. So I like to go by era by era. This era today of heavyweights. I watched the Parker and Wilder fight. And Wilder is past his prime, right? Anthony Joshua, he's still young, but these guys they're not at their best, right? Parker is not at his best, right? Dubois is still young. He's not the same fighter though. Not after his fight with Joe Joyce. But he's still competitive because the heavyweight division is not as good as it is today. But you look at these guys, right? And I can't think of a heavyweight from the past that would have been as successful as Wilder if they had a Wilder right hand with those boxing skills. I can't think of one. And maybe it's because the heavyweight division isn't that good. I look at the Parker fight and Wilder fight, and I'm like, look at how many mistakes Wilder is making. And those are the same mistakes he was making working with his old trainer, right? These are the same mistakes he was making when he was knocking everybody off. I mean, Duhaupas, Gerald Washington, Spilka, all these guys were almost close to beating Wilder. and they just got clipped. They just got clipped. And I don't even know if these heavyweights today are even have the punch resistance like they used to in the past. Wilder's right hand is great for today's era, but his resume, those guys all been knocked out. Some of them more than 3 or 4 times. So I'm looking at the heavyweight division and I'm looking at Anthony Joshua fight his last opponent. And I'm like, we supposed to be impressed with something like that? This is the modern day era? That guy that Anthony Joshua beat, he's what's special about that? Ndongo is going to be probably one of Anthony Joshua's hardest fights. And is it because Ndongo is a freak of nature? Is it because Ndongo is just this natural athlete and that he could just wipe through any sport if he played it? Or is it because this heavyweight division is just weak? Is it just weak? Tyson Fury said his hardest fight is with Ndongo, not Wilder, right? No, not Wilder, not Steve Cunningham, but with an MMA fighter. And now we have DAZN doing everything they can to make sure that the fans will get intrigued to seeing a Wilder and AJ fight. We're going to watch Wilder and AJ fight, and they're going to be two guys past their primes. And whoever wins, there's still going to be a debate because they didn't fight in their primes. And I'm sorry to tell you, but if Zhang is really fighting Wilder, Wilder might lose that fight and AJ might lose that fight. I have no idea what DAZN is going. I don't know what they're trying to do. But if the both of these guys lose that night, right? If the both of them lose, do we still want to see Wilder and AJ fight? What's up, Bruce? Salute. Do we still want to see them fight? I don't see anyone as much talking about Fury and Usyk. That is an undisputed fight coming up for the undisputed heavyweight champion. And you know why no one cares about it? Because we sat there and watched the 10-round fight with the guy who has no professional boxing experience beat on the heavyweight champion of the world. So no one cares. And if AJ loses to Ndongo, did Ndongo just prove that he's just a freak of nature and that he could have just been the greatest heavyweight of all time because he's fought Fury and now he's fighting Anthony Joshua? Anthony Joshua, who has the best resume in the heavyweight division today? Or is it because the heavyweight division just sucks that you could have someone like Ndongo come through there? Listen, forget this whole 10 rounds exhibition fight that they want to call it. Ndongo's going there to really win. They might as well just say Ndongo is a heavyweight fighter. Because right now, Ndongo has a better resume than a lot of the active heavyweights today. And that's only going to be with 2 fights. Can you imagine if Ndongo fought Larry Holmes in his prime? He would have jabbed him to death. He would have jabbed him to death. No heavyweight today is faster than Larry Holmes. No heavyweight today got better footwork than Larry Holmes. No heavyweight today got better punch placement than Larry Holmes. Not Fury, not AJ, not Wilder, not Parker. None of these guys. And this is an era where heavyweights are bigger and stronger, right? Supposedly. And don't we have fighters like Miller who tested positive for like 4 different things? You think Miller is the only heavyweight on PEDs? No, if you have the right connections and the right promoters and the right people backing you up, and you're a fighter that can sell, I can guarantee you that you can get away with doing PEDs. The Zone know that Miller is good at selling fights. This guy got caught with 4 different banned substances, I believe. And he came back to boxing. This was his 2nd fight, I believe. Or his 3rd fight after testing positive for so many different things before his fight with Anthony Joshua. And he gets a pass. And the use of PEDs is a whole nother conversation. Because I could go on and on about that. Because I don't trust these VADA testing. I don't trust the USADA. I don't trust any of these organizations when it comes to certain fighters. I don't remember who busted Canelo. They made a mistake. And they know they made a mistake. They were supposed to throw that one under the rug. Somebody didn't get the memo. And that's the reason why Canelo only got suspended for 6 months. 6 months is rest nowadays for fighters, right? Fighters only fight twice a year, once a year. 6 months, that's not a real suspension, that's rest. And in the 3 months he took a break and then went back to training. So the heavyweight division sucks. You have guys like Usyk, right? He cherry-picked Dubois. He gets hit with a body shot. Cries to the referee, said it was a low blow, and it worked. Robbed Dubois of a win. Robbed him of a win. And if you were an Usyk fan, you said it was a low blow. But any fighter that gets hit on the belt, that's legal. In any boxing commission, any state, whatever their rules is, it's always legal on the belt line. It's below the belt line that it's illegal. But Usyk is supposedly this guy that is better than Holyfield. He would have wiped through the 70s. He would have beat outboxed every heavyweight in the 90s. He's too slick and too fast for the heavyweights in the 60s. He's too big and strong for the heavyweights in the 50s and the 40s. But Dubois isn't the big heavyweight of today's era. Dubois was going into that fight with almost a career-ending injury. That was a cherry pick. Gone wrong. Right? How good is Dubois really? Just how good is Dubois really? But I will say this. I enjoy watching the heavyweights today, but I don't think that they're better than the heavyweights of the past. I mean, what heavyweight fight have we got today that displayed skills, grit, heart, like Riddick Bowe and Holyfield? Was it the Wilder and Fury third fight? These guys was all over the place with sloppy punches. They're falling all over the place. It was a nightmare. It was an entertaining fight. But did they look like two professionals? I mean, the night that those two guys fought each other, Indongo probably would have beat both of those guys that night too. Where's the Joe Frazier in Muhammad Ali 1 fight today? Where's that? Where is the Holyfield in Riddick Bowe? Where is that? Where are these fights? Where is the Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko? Where are these type of fights? We don't have it. We don't have it. This heavyweight division is so weak, in my opinion, that now you got guys in MMA just disrespecting the sport. And it seems like Indongo added more validity to the argument, because Indongo went in there and beat the heavyweight world champion. Even put him on his butt. And I don't think that would have happened in the golden era of the heavyweight division. Not at all. So we have rumors of Zhang and Wilder fighting. Wilder once again on the undercard of an Anthony Joshua fight. And we have Indongo fighting AJ. And I know what they're trying to do, because they know that this fight is going to generate a lot of money, so that even the next event would be even more, add more money to promote their next event. I don't know if I could trust DAZN. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if Indongo was really in there going to be really fighting. I don't know if Zhang is going to be really in there fighting. I don't know. I'm just speculating. Because it looks to me like DAZN is trying to set up the AJ and Wilder fight still, because they didn't think that Wilder was going to lose to Parker. That would have been the next event now, but it's not. So now they have to try it again. I mean, you mean to tell me Wilder don't want to have a rematch with Parker? Why? You just lost to him. Go back and beat him. At least AJ, he tried to beat Usyk. Didn't do it. Lost to Andy Ruiz, came back and beat him. Yeah, you tried to beat Fury. It's cool. But then now you lost to Parker. You don't want to run that back? You still talking about Anthony Joshua. It's all about the money, people. It's all about the money. This is the MOBC.